The mansion was a living thing. Mac felt it in the groan of floorboards, the sigh of the wind through drafty halls. He wandered its echoing chambers, a solitary figure in a sea of shadowed grandeur. One day Mac noticed a door he'd never seen before, as if it had materialized from the house itself. He reached for the handle, a sense of foreboding tightening in his chest. He hesitated, then pushed it open. The darkness within was absolute. It wasn't the absence of light, but a tangible void that seemed to push back against him. No sound emanated from the space beyond. No scent, no sense of depth or dimension. It was a singularity of nothingness that both terrified and compelled him. Mac reached for his lighter, the small flame feeling pathetically inadequate against the oppressive darkness. He took a tentative step forward. The floorboards beneath were cold and gritty, as if undisturbed for centuries. He felt a prickle of fear on the back of his neck, a primal instinct urging him to flee. He backed away, his heart pounding in his chest. He slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the empty house like a gunshot. Mac leaned against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had never encountered anything like it. It was a darkness that seemed to have a life of its own, a sentient entity that defied explanation. He hurried away from the door, his footsteps loud in the sudden silence. But the image of that impenetrable void lingered in his mind, a stain of unease that he couldn't shake. The night was filled with strange, unsettling sounds. Whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls of the mansion, too faint to decipher but too insistent to ignore. Mac tried to convince himself it was the wind, the pipes, the settling of the old house. But deep down, he knew it was something else. He found himself drawn back to the hallway, to the impossible door. It stood ajar now, a sliver of that impenetrable darkness bleeding into the hallway. He could hear the whispers more clearly now, like insects skittering across dry leaves. They seemed to emanate from the darkness beyond the door, beckoning him closer. He pressed his ear to the cool wood, his heart pounding in his chest. The whispers grew louder, swirling around him, weaving themselves into unsettling phrases. He couldn't quite make out the words, but their tone was urgent, pleading. A cold dread washed over him, a certainty that whatever lay beyond that door was not meant for his eyes. Max stumbled back from the door, fear gripping him with icy fingers. He fled to his room, locking himself in, the whispers still echoing in his ears. The next morning, Mac awoke with a start. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 8 times, but the clock on his bedside table read 3:30. He checked his watch, his phone, all different times. He wandered through the house in a daze, the events of the previous night feeling like a fever dream. He found a vase shattered on the floor, its shards arranged in a spiral pattern. He had no recollection of breaking it. A portrait of his great-aunt, which had always hung above the fireplace, now adorned a wall in the dining room. Her eyes seemed to follow him as he passed. He stopped at the end of the hallway. The door stood open, wider than he had left it, and emanating from the darkness beyond, he could hear a new sound. It was the distinct, rhythmic thump of footsteps. Someone, or something, was pacing just beyond the threshold of his perception. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sense of wrongness that permeated every fiber of his being. Time was fractured, reality shifting around him like sand dunes in a windstorm. He was losing his grip, his sanity teetering on the precipice. Mac's reflection in the hallway mirror no longer looked like him. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but a subtle distortion. His eyes were slightly wider, the pupils too large, reflecting the darkness of the door. The lines around his mouth seemed deeper, etched with an anxiety he didn't consciously feel. He touched his face. It felt the same, but the image in the mirror remained unchanged. He turned away from the unsettling reflection, only to find another mirror at the end of the hallway reflecting the first. The image of himself, distorted and alien, stared back at him from an endless procession of reflections. He stumbled back, bumping into a table. A photograph frame fell, the glass shattering. Mac picked up the picture. It was a photo of himself as a child, smiling brightly. But as he watched, the smile in the photo twisted into a grotesque grimace, the eyes turning black and bottomless. His own reflection was changing, morphing, becoming something else. He couldn't trust his own eyes, his own perception of reality. He was trapped in a hall of mirrors, his sanity slowly unraveling with each passing moment. The voice started subtly. It was just a murmur at the edge of hearing, a whisper that sounded eerily like his own thoughts. At first, Mac dismissed it as exhaustion, or maybe just stress, but, it grew stronger, more insistent with every passing day. It echoed his own thoughts but with this sinister inflection, a kind of mocking undertone that chilled him. He found himself talking out loud, arguing with the voice in his head, trying desperately to drown it out. But it was useless. It was always there, a constant presence in his mind, whispering doubts, amplifying his fears, turning his own thoughts against him. The voice was insidious, seeping into his every thought, every action. It sowed seeds of doubt, making him question his sanity, his memories. He felt like he was losing himself, his identity dissolving into the echoing abyss of the voice. Then, one evening he heard the voice speaking to him from the other side of the door. It was his voice, his cadence but laced with a chilling amusement. Mac was no longer sure if he was speaking or being spoken to. The line between himself and the voice was blurring, and he was no longer certain who or what he was becoming. The decision to seal the door came to him in a moment of desperate clarity. He just couldn't live like this anymore, haunted by the whispers, the shifting reality, the echoing voice that was stealing his sanity. He boarded up the door, hammering plank after plank into the ancient wood, sealing it shut. He worked through the night, fueled by a desperate hope that this would somehow stop the madness seeping into his world. He reinforced the doorframe, bolted heavy chains across it, each clang of the hammer a desperate prayer for normalcy. Finally, exhausted but honestly, strangely exhilarated, he surveyed his work. The door was now a solid wall of wood and metal, a testament to his determination to shut out the darkness. He felt a flicker of hope, a sliver of light in the oppressive darkness that had descended upon him. He slept soundly for the first time in days, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. But upon waking, a cold dread settled in the pit of his stomach. The silence was just too complete, the air heavy with a sense of anticipation. Something was wrong. Max stood in the middle of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He just couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the sound of his own breathing. He ran his hand over the rough wood of the sealed door, a cold sweat prickling his skin. Then he heard it, a sound that sent a chill down his spine, a sound that honestly defied logic and reason. A knock, a single heavy knock, but it wasn't coming from the hallway, from the other side of the sealed door. It was coming from the other side of the room, from the space where the door had been. He backed away slowly, his eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the sound, but there was nothing there. Just the boarded-up wall where the door had once stood, and yet the knocking continued, slow and deliberate, each thud echoing in the silence. Terror gripped him, cold and paralyzing. He was trapped. Whatever lay beyond the door, whatever had whispered to him, had followed him, had somehow breached the barrier he had so desperately erected. Max sank to the floor, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the spot where the knocking continued. He was lost in a labyrinth of his own mind, the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred beyond recognition. The knocking reverberated through the house, through him, each thud a hammer blow to his sanity. He had sealed the door, but he had also sealed his fate. He was trapped in his own personal nightmare, a prisoner in the mansion that had become both his prison and his tormentor. The knocking continued, relentless, a promise of something terrible to come. But the true horror lay in the unknown. What waited for him on the other side of the wall? What had he let into his world? The questions echoed in the silence, unanswered, a chilling testament to the enduring power of fear and the terrifying depths of the unknown. The mansion held its breath and Mac waited, his sanity slowly unraveling with each echoing knock, trapped in an endless nightmare of his own making.